So, goal setting. It is paramount to have complete clarity on what you're actually trying to achieve. No matter what it is you're trying to do, running, business, work, any sport, any music, whatever, it's absolutely imperative you know what you are trying to achieve. And for me, since I got back into running in 2010, it was always to run as fast as I possibly could. And then it became competitive. And then it was about setting course records, winning races, and trying to win bigger and bigger in races. And for me, I guess, because I moved very quickly to Spain, because I knew that that was the best place for me to be, to train, to get better, and then moved to Granada, which was the best place to be to get better, specifically for that race in Granada, Subida a Pico Valletta, 50k uphill. I then became a good uphill runner because I was constantly running uphills for long periods of time in order to get back better in that race. And I knew that if I could, that every race says it's the hardest race in the world. And it's true that if you run it as hard as you possibly can, every race in the world, including 100 meters, is the hardest race in the world. So it's dubbed the hardest race in the world, but it's 50k uphill. There's not so many places in the world that you can run 50k uphill. But I knew that if I improved at that race and I moved towards the front of the race and moved towards the podium, and then I ended up winning the race and then ended up setting the course record, I knew that naturally the rest of my running, the rest of the races that I attended and competed in, I would get good as well. And I'd represent Britain and England and all that jazz. And so I knew naturally if I focused on that one thing that was supposed to be the hardest race in the world, I'd become good. And definitely running uphill was my strength. And to be fair, over the years, I've neglected running downhill because it's an uphill 50k race. So Conrad's Marathon, perfect example. It's a race that is like, the history is immense. I think it's 100 years old, or it was 100 years old this year, or maybe next year. There's other races in the world, 50, 60 years old. Subida a Pico Valletta is 40 years old. I love the history so that you've got that, but also you're competing on a day with everybody who turns up, and you're only ever competing with everybody who turns up, but you're also competing with anybody who's ever ran that course. And yeah, of course, like training, nutrition, shoes have improved, etc., etc. It's easy for us now than ever before to run fast, but you still can compete time versus anybody who's ever ran that race. And that to me is, it's almost like a world record on that course. It's a course record. So that's always appealed to me, to go to these historic races and run as fast as I possibly can and try to kind of compare myself against people who have done really great things in the past and won those races. So Conrad's a perfect example, and it's the perfect example of setting your sights high, failing, but also knowing exactly, when you look back, knowing exactly why you failed. So for me, Conrad's massive race, as I said, 100 years of history, 90 kilometers or 89 kilometers. It was an up year, the year that I did it in 2019. 2,000 meters up, about 1,000 meters down, so it's undulating. It's not really, because of the distance, there are hills, but there's nothing major in it, I guess. But they kind of hit you at the wrong time. They hit you later on in the race. And I just didn't protect that dream like I should. So if I look back at it and I look back on the weeks leading up to it, yeah, I was doing what I usually do, which is averaging about 250 kilometers on the bike, about 100 kilometers, 80 to 100 kilometers running. So I always do a little bit less running than the usual ultra runner, but more time on the bike. I was doing the strength training, the gym training, everything else that comes with it. But then in the few weeks leading up to the race, I took on silly obligations that I shouldn't have in America. Then I was back in Dubai. Then I was doing so much traveling, so much work stuff, commercial stuff. And then once I got to the race, I was absolutely knackered. No excuses at all, because it's my own fault. I have to take responsibility for not guarding a dream. But if I felt as if I would have guarded that properly, then I would have gone faster on the day. I ended up coming 12th. It's an amazing race. it's like you land in South Africa, you've read the books, you've watched the films, you know a little bit, you think you know a little bit about their history. It's deep in kind of like the division, and the amazing thing is that sport on the day separates that, and nobody cares for that day. For the day of sport, nobody cares, and you just are supported by everybody, and it really shows you the power of sport. I remember being on the start line and 25,000 people right at the front. Dark. I think they start at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. We seem to get there really early in order to avoid the queues and the traffic and stuff like that. I remember warming up in a hotel or some kind of like government building, and then being on the start line, waiting on the start line for about 10-15 minutes, and then hearing these 3 songs, and literally there was goosebumps on the back of my neck. It was immense. But it's the first time I've ever set off, and we were running sub 3 minute kilometers, so well under 5 minutes per mile, and there was about 100 people in front of me, and I just thought, what the fuck is this? And I had no idea what was going on. I'd never seen that fast of a start. I knew from speaking to people before, there's going to be people that go off fast. They want TV time, they want to get on the TV, etc. And I knew there was going to be a few people. I didn't think there was going to be 100 people in front of me after 3 kilometers. It was insane. I think first kilometer, should have checked Strava, but first kilometer was something like 2:58, 3 minutes, 3:02, something like that. Second kilometer, I just had to slow it down, and then realize it's going to be the second half when everything counts. When it starts to get hard, the hills start to get hard, the heat starts to get heavy. And so, yeah, I came away from that. I mean, I got to 50K, had a problem with shoes. I had to take my shoes off, literally rip my toenail off. Didn't come off, so I had to fold it behind the toe, put my sock on really tight and put it on for the last 40K. Just remember every step just banging and hitting against this toenail that was just shaking around, and my foot was just full of blood. But again, no excuses. It's just lack of preparation. I decided to choose the new shoes they give me in the wrong size rather than with my previous sponsor, by the way, not with Craft. And just because that's what I felt obligated to do. I should have protected it and said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm doing it in what I know. And got to have the confidence, the process. You got to say no to things. You got to say no to work projects that come up in order to make sure that you are as fresh as possible to go on race day, in order for you to finish your training properly, to not be an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 on the start line, to be a 10 out of 10 on the start line and give yourself the best possible chance. Because of everything I've probably done so far, that's one of my biggest regrets. It's one of the biggest races that I've run. Came 12th in 5 hours 54. I was going to win it. Like that was my mentality. I was going there to take the win, and I knew to win it I'd need to run about 3:40 per kilometer. I ended up running 4 minutes per kilometer, and I was well off. But on the day, I could have run probably between 10 and 15 minutes quicker easily. I think I stopped for 4 or 5 minutes with shoe, taking a leak, stuff like that. I could have gone faster. So it was frustrating, but come the end, I remember just being so glad to have finished and actually have a result at Comrades in order to then go back. And then it was COVID, etc., stuff like that. I still need to go back. I still want to do an up run and go as fast as I possibly can, but go much faster. But the goal setting is so important, because if you don't know what you're aiming for, you can kind of get caught up on the day of what you're trying to achieve, when in actual fact what you're trying to achieve is your personal thing. Nobody cares about it at all. Nobody cares apart from you and maybe the person that loves you the most. Nothing else matters. So you have to guard that with your life.